satire in modern politics. SNL, the laugh that hurts.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Why we laugh at a sick world. Hello, my darlings. I'm Meeks. And before we begin, huge shout out to Natalie for buying our very first 2 coffees. You are quite literally the backbone of these crazy ideas. And to all of our new subscribers and first-time viewers, welcome to Studio Meeks, where we use humor, philosophy, and a little bit of existential despair to make sense of the flaming carnival that is our modern democracy. Picture it. It's 11:29 p.m. on a Saturday. You're sprawled on the couch somewhere between existential dread and your third La Croix when that familiar trumpet fanfare blares.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
It's Saturday Night Live!
Or maybe a clip comes up on your TikTok feed a couple hours later or something. But for a moment, you feel culturally informed, politically awakened, maybe even morally superior. Or you're completely triggered. However, by midnight, you've laughed at a few punchlines about Congress, nodded in ironic agreement or disagreement, and gone to bed feeling like you participated in democracy without actually doing anything.
What is this country coming to? We're so divided. How did we get here? We need to heal. One love, one love. Where's our respect? Why is everyone so numb to violence? Stop! Hey, stop it! It's like, where do we go from here?
But my argument, to be backed up by the author and lecturer Dieter de Klerk, is that right there is the magic and the tragedy of modern satire. Defined as an entertaining form of social commentary, satire occurs in many forms: novels, poems, and essays, films, shows, and cartoons. However, there's something bleakly poetic about the fact that it, and by proxy laughter, has become our default political response. We laugh at corruption, at hypocrisy, at existential collapse.
Hey everyone, welcome to Weekend Update. I'm Michael Che.
Colin Jost. President Trump declared a national emergency yesterday and said we need a wall to stop the flow of drugs into our country. And to demonstrate how bad the drug problem is, Trump spent 20 minutes doing his impression of a coke addict.
It's all a big lie. It's a big con game. I don't know what to do with all the money they're giving us. It's crazy. 8 billion or 2 billion or 1.5 billion. It's going to build a lot of wall. We give death penalty, fire and fury, total annihilation, the Nobel Peace Prize. I'll probably never get it, but that's okay. They gave it to Obama, so that's the story.
And what a beautiful story it was.
Because the alternative is panic. From The Daily Show to Last Week Tonight, American democracy now comes pre-packaged with punchlines. We watch political scandals unfold through the rhythm of late-night monologue, where corruption is met with applause or vitriol, complaints, and outrage. The line between journalism and stand-up has collapsed, and for good reason. When the news often feels like parody, only parody can make it digestible.
Hi guys. Legalize comedy! Legalize comedy! Come on! Legalize it!
It's like, legalize comedy! Legalize comedy!
I mean, we're not going to get it perfect, you know?
And I should say, we will make mistakes. We won't be perfect.
But we are firing the non-essential employees, like air traffic controllers.
If the job is not essential, or they're not doing the job well, they obviously should not be on the public payroll.
You know, I'm the president now, right? I'm kidding. Okay, maybe not.
Well, that's what part of this discussion is about.
Well, you can't be president of the U.S. Last time I checked, right?
Not officially.
Not officially. Okay, so you're the unofficial president.
According to philosopher Dieter de Klerk, satire doesn't change the world. It helps us survive it. In Satire, Comedy, and Mental Health, de Klerk argues that satire is not the revolution. It's the group therapy session that happens after the revolution fails. He describes it as catharsis masquerading as critique. In short, satire doesn't stop the bleeding. It just gives us the emotional band-aid. And honestly, he's right. We like to think think of satire as a weapon, the comedian as a gladiator, the joke as our guillotine. But if laughter really killed, Alec Baldwin's Trump impression would have been the political equivalent of a war crime. But while Donald Trump was perhaps the most satirized president in American history, he was also the one most immune to it. The more comedians mocked him, the stronger his cultural armor became. Shows like SNL became weekly rituals of collective exasperation, but to half the country, they were just noise. Elitist sneering wrapped in sketch comedy. When Jon Stewart said that if his goal were real social change, we're not picking a very effective avenue, he wasn't being cynical. He was being honest. Satire's job isn't to heal the world. It's to help us not lose our minds while we watch it fall apart.
Why are you guys so anti-dictators? Imagine if America was a dictatorship. You could let 1% of the people have all the nation's wealth. You could help your rich friends get richer by cutting their taxes and bailing them out when they gamble and lose. You could ignore the needs of the poor for healthcare and education. Your media would appear free, but would secretly be controlled by one person and his family. You could wiretap phones. You could torture foreign prisoners. You could have rigged elections. You could lie about why you go to war. You could fill your prisons with one particular racial group, and no one would complain. You could use the media to scare the people into supporting policies that are against their interests. I know this is hard for you Americans to imagine, but please try.
De Klerk calls this heroic conception of satire, the idea that jokes can save us. But the truth is less cinematic. Satire doesn't slay the dragon. It teaches us to live in the dragon's stomach. It turns the unbearable into the laughable, and sometimes that's the only thing keeping us from losing it completely. Act 1. A short history of laughing at power. Satire has been part of American politics since before the US had an actual government to laugh at. Before there were late-night monologues or Weekend Update, there were cartoons, crude, biting, and just subversive enough to make the British crown nervous. Under King George's rule, colonial pamphleteers used humor as both shield and sword. Benjamin Franklin wasn't just a founding father. He was the first American meme lord. His essays, Rules by Which a Great Empire May be Reduced to a Small One, and A Witch Trial at Mount Holly, disguised revolutionary fire as wit. In other words, America laughed its way into independence. By the late 1800s, Thomas Nast was cartooning political corruption into oblivion, while Mark Twain used humor to expose the absurdity of slavery, capitalism, and human stupidity. Then came Broadway's 1930s era, where satire danced on stage. Irving Berlin and Moss Hartz, As Thousands Cheer, used show tunes to drag politicians. America had discovered a secret weapon. If you make politics funny enough, people might actually pay attention. And then came television, the medium that transformed satire from subversive art into a weekly national therapy session. From That Was the Week That Was to The Smothers Brothers, comedy hour political jokes became primetime. Nixon even appeared on Laugh In 1968 to say, "Sock it to me."
NBC. Beautiful downtown Burbank. Oh, hello, Governor Rockefeller. Oh, no. I don't think we could get Mr. Nixon to stand still for a socket to me.
Socket to me?
Which is basically the 20th century version of tweeting #relatable. But it was Saturday Night Live that truly fused politics with pop culture. Chevy Chase's clumsy Gerald Ford, Dana Carvey's Bush Sr., Will Ferrell's Bush Jr., each caricature defined its era more than the actual presidents did. And when Tina Fey stepped into Sarah Palin's Kitten Heels in 2008, the line between parody and politics evaporated. Fey didn't just imitate Palin, she became her. Polls even showed that people mixed up Fey's quotes with the real ones. That's how powerful satire became. It literally rewrote political memory. Then came Weekend Update, SNL's fake news desk that somehow became more emotionally reliable than real news. Since 1975, it served as America's collective exhale. By the way, if you're still here, thank you. Seriously, this kind of chaos doesn't sustain itself on irony alone. So if you're enjoying our content, do consider subscribing, hitting the bell, drop a comment. Tell me what you think about the role satire plays in our modern political landscape. Give me more to think about because I love to think. Because this channel runs on caffeine, overthinking, and people like you showing up. So thank you. Act 2. The paradox of satire in a polarized world. Here's where things start to get messy. Satire used to unite us. Everyone could agree that the politicians were clowns. But in the age of polarization, laughter itself has become partisan. Baldwin's Trump wasn't just a skit. It was a cultural battlefield. To one side, it was a masterclass in irony. To the other, it was coastal elitism wearing a wig. Satire's job was to puncture hypocrisy. But now the targets are too fragmented. Everyone has their own truth, their own algorithm, and their own villain. A joke that feels righteous to one side feels cruel to the other.
On Wednesday, Trump nominated Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, and Gaetz said the same thing he does when he sees a teenage girl: "I'll do it." Gaetz, who was created when Frankenstein raped Dracula, was chosen for Attorney General after Trump remembered that his original pick was found dead in a jail cell.
And so satire loses its bite, not because it stopped being funny, but because it stopped communicating a balanced and shared experience. Saturday Night Live faces criticism from both conservative and liberal media for its political comedy, though the specific complaints differ. Broadly conservative criticism alleges a pervasive liberal bias, while liberal critique argues the show can be too soft on powerful Democrats or that its satire is ineffective. De Klerk would say that this is where satire's true purpose reemerges, not to reform, but to help us cope. He frames satire as a balancing act between care for others and care for the self. We laugh to critique, but we also laugh to stay sane. It's not apathy, it's emotional triage. Satire is how we scream politely. As television evolved, satire became news itself. The Daily Show, The Colbert Report, and later, Last Week Tonight, blurred the line between journalist and jester. Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and John Oliver didn't just mock the news, they contextualized it. They gave viewers what traditional media often fails to do: sincerity through irony. Jeffrey Bayham argued these programs formed a new kind of discursive integration, a space where humor and information were successfully fused. Their power wasn't in replacing journalism, but in restoring trust through laughter. And the data backed it up. According to the 2004 Pew survey, young audiences were turning to late-night comedy, not just for laughs, but for literacy. The Daily Show generation didn't just consume jokes, they consumed politics. In some ways, satire had become the most successful civic education project of the 21st century. Research even found that regular viewers of satirical news were more politically informed than those who relied solely on mainstream outlets.
Well, it is nice to start Update with some good news for once. There is peace in the Middle East. The only downside is there's war in Chicago. Only Trump could Freaky Friday Chicago and Gaza. And I know Trump is upset that he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, but the last guy to send heavily armed men into an American city was Bane from Batman. Bane, who was also snubbed for the Peace Prize. And Trump deserves credit, I have to say, for brokering this ceasefire in Gaza, but I'm slightly skeptical since Biden also negotiated a ceasefire in Gaza 9 months ago. Remember that? No? Well, neither does Biden. The actual Nobel Peace Prize was awarded this week to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, or as Fox News reported it, Trump robbed by deranged Hispanic.
If irony is the last defense against apathy, these shows made it fashionable to care again. But the story doesn't end with enlightenment. There's a darker undercurrent to this laughter. Some scholars warn that political satire can do the opposite of mobilizing engagement. That constant mockery breeds cynicism. When everything is a joke, belief becomes embarrassing. If politicians are always clowns, then politics becomes a circus, something to watch, not participate in. Still, there's nuance here. Studies show that when politicians lean into satire, when they show that they can take the joke, public opinion softens. Humor, it turns out, humanizes. What's evident is that the tension between laughter as liberation and laughter as surrender sits at the heart of modern satire. It's what makes Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update such an enduring cultural fixture. It's a fake newscast that somehow feels more honest than the real thing. It doesn't just tell you what happened, it tells you how to emotionally survive it. When Colin Jost and Michael Che riff on the week's disasters. It's not just comedy, it's collective processing. The punchlines are pressure valves for a nation perpetually boiling over. Still, as the national political landscape fractures, satire faces its own existential crisis. Context that once made jokes work, that common understanding of absurdity, has eroded. In a polarized world, the same joke can be a laugh line for one audience and an insult to another.
I grew up Republican. My mother is literally on that side right there. And I do not remember it ever being like this. And the reason that it became like this, in my opinion, was because of Donald Trump, right? So we saw this insane racial divide. We saw the increase in Asian hate crimes. We saw the racist xenophobia. When we talk about illegal immigration from the last episode, we never talk about the white ones. We're only talking about the brown ones, right? So like, there's all of these social issues that have changed. Like, honestly, I am less attached to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump than I am to you. I'm gonna interact with you far more often. And so why do we feel that like we can't just, like I went to, and on the break, like I went and got a coffee and it was like chill, right? Like that's how it should be. It used to be like that. I remember when it was like that. And the reason that it is so polarized and it's so toxic and the reason that we're like cutting off family members and like blocking people on Instagram is because of Donald Trump, you guys. It really wasn't like this. And I just need you to acknowledge, just acknowledge the change.
Respond to that. What happened with Donald Trump actually became an expression of what Republicans were feeling. For years, we've been taking the brunt of a whole bunch of stuff. We've had Hillary Clinton call us a basket of deplorables. She called the racist deplorables.
Do you identify with who she called deplorables?
Wait, she called us basket of deplorables. I remember Julia Roberts got on the television. She said that Republicans are somewhere between reptiles and repugnant. We've been taking it and taking it, the name calling. You had Obama talk about those people with guns and whatever. We've been hearing all these things and getting peeps of these things behind the curtains. The difference between Donald Trump and those people is that Donald Trump says out loud what you guys, or not you guys, but what the Democrats have been saying in private. And what's happened is the Democrats has now been recorded and it's come out, all of their stuff. But both sides have been saying everything. And so finally, Republicans said enough. With the Tea Party came out, taxed enough already. We said no more. We got to stop this, man. And we just got, I get so frustrated about it.
We heard your son say he remembers a time when it just wasn't like this. Do you agree?
No. And the reason that I don't agree is
come on.
Wait, no. Well, in our home, everything was peaceful and copacetic. But what's happened...
was. Emphasis on was. Was copacetic, and then it changed. We never fought like this. Our family was never this separate until Donald Trump. And that's my point, is that it wasn't always like this. Your party has changed.
Right.
And you guys keep letting it change. This is not the Republican Party that I grew up in. Y'all just like move with this like hive mindset where he says something and y'all are like, yes, sir. And I'm like, that's weird. It's weird, y'all. You don't push back on your politics.
SNL sketches no longer unify, they divide. The danger isn't that satire has lost its teeth. It's that we've lost our sense of humor as a common language. The laughter that once stitched together democracy now echoes inside echo chambers. Act 3. The therapy session masquerading as a news cycle. That tension between critique and entertainment is the tightrope every satirist walks. Weekend Update is the perfect example. It promises the news, but really it's just therapy. You tune in not to learn what happened, but to make what happened already bearable. And yet the laughter is double-edged. DeClercq calls this the two-pronged assault of satire. Outrage and laughter. Anger and relief. You need to care enough to be angry, but also detached enough to keep your own sanity. The danger comes when that balance tips too far in one direction. Too much outrage and you burn out. Too much laughter and you stop caring. Satire's function then isn't to change the world. It's to make living in a broken one tolerable. But lately it feels like we're leaning too hard on the laughter side, using humor to avoid the grief that comes with recognizing just how fractured everything has become. Polarization has made the balancing act nearly impossible. The same joke can be heard as a rallying cry or an attack, depending on who's watching. What used to be collective release has become cultural trench warfare. On one side, we see conservative criticism, accusing SNL of being a liberal viper pit that mocks right-wing figures while going easy on liberals. Examples of this ongoing strong narrative include skewed portrayal of supporters after the 2025 SNL 50th anniversary special. Comedian Bill Maher and other conservative commentators criticized a sketch featuring a MAGA character who refuses to shake a black host's hand. Maher argued that the caricature was an unfair stereotype and did not ring true, while others called the portrayal insulting. Current President Donald Trump repeatedly attacked the show on social media during and after his presidency, especially during Alec Baldwin's portrayal of him, calling the satire Republican hit jobs. His administration also called the show a waste and unfunny. Some conservatives argue that Democratic politicians like Barack Obama and Joe Biden have not received the same level of harsh and consistent mockery that their Republican counterparts have also received. Critics have condemned this one-sidedness, as well as the show for joking about non-political conservatives, such as the 2018 segment starring Pete Davidson that made a joke about decorated war veteran and former Representative Dan Crenshaw. On the other side, liberal criticism argues that the satire falls flat and that the current political commentary is perceived as ineffective or centrist. Some liberal critics, including commentators from Vice, have slammed the show's political cold opens for spoon-feeding the audience's assumptions rather than offering incisive satire. Certain progressive commentators argue that SNL's reliance on celebrity hosts and both sidism argues that the show can make light of politicians without challenging them on substantive issues. While conservatives see bias, some liberals argue that SNL has failed to adequately or consistently satirize some of the most powerful Democratic figures. The SNL audience laughs at a parody of a Republican senator. The other half of the country sees it as proof of media bias. In that divide, satire loses its universality. It stops being the language of critique and becomes the language of right, wrong, good, and evil.
What political party do you most identify with?
Independent.
What's one criticism you have of the left?
It's inability to accept the other party. I noticed that there's a big pushback from the right, and instead of trying to educate them on things, it's more of like a, you disagree with me, well, I disagree with you, and we shouldn't be together, I do not like you, you know, that kind of stuff. And I noticed that from both sides, but I do notice it very strongly from the left.
What's a criticism you have of the right?
The right's inability to accept others, you know, so I think that the left really wants to accept people, wants to be so accepting, and I think the right isn't much about that. I think it's much about how, you know, older standards and stuff like that. It causes a big divide between both of them because one of them's pushing forward and the other one's kind of pushing back, and I think that there could be a nice balance, but I think that everyone's just trying to attack each other. So I think it's kind of the same criticism. You know, no one's really accepting of each other.
Cleric might say that the failure isn't with satire itself, but with the conditions under which it now exists. A sick world, he writes, demands laughter not because it heals, but because it keeps us from collapsing under the weight of the truth. But when even laughter becomes politicized, what's left to hold on to? Maybe that's why satire feels exhausted. It's not that comedians have lost their edge, it's that the audience has lost its shared sense of absurdity. There's no common ground left to stand on, no collective joke we all agree is funny. And in that vacuum, satire becomes less about critique and more about coping. It's the same reason Weekend Update jokes land like sighs now, because they're not rallying cries anymore, they're stress relief. We laugh not to rebel, but to survive the absurdity of the headlines. De Klerk says that satire helps us cope with a sick world we cannot fully heal. Maybe that's the real tragedy of modern satire. It's still doing its job, but the world has gotten sicker. In the end, satire might not be dead, but it's definitely changed species. It's not a weapon, it's a shield. It doesn't cure, but it comforts. It doesn't overthrow leaders, but it keeps us sane enough to resist despair. In a way, that's what Nietzsche meant when he said, "We have art so we do not die of the truth." Weekend Update might not save democracy, but it might help us make it through another news cycle without giving up entirely. And maybe that's all satire was ever supposed to do. Not to fix the world, but to make it bearable enough to keep living in. De Klerk argues that satire's value isn't in revolution, it's in resilience. It's the art of coping with the unfixable. Satirists like modern-day jesters remind us that it's okay to laugh at the apocalypse. It's not denial, it's a method of survival. As Nietzsche wrote, we have art in order not to die of the truth. De Klerk updates that we have satire so we don't die of politics. Think of Weekend Update as America's weekly group therapy. Every punchline is a mini catharsis, a reminder that even when democracy feels like a reality show, it's still our reality show. Satire gives meaning to the meaningless. It's the cultural version of gallows humor, whistling while the empire burns. But there's a danger too. When satire becomes comfort, it loses critique. When laughing replaces acting, we've crossed into apathy. Sharing a John Oliver clip isn't the same as civic engagement, but in our modern day, it can feel like it. We get the rush of moral superiority without the inconvenience of protest, activism, and engagement. It's a political catharsis with none of the work. And yet de Klerk resists cynicism. He argues that laughter, even performative, ironic, slightly nihilistic laughter, is still a sign of life. It's still resistance, even if it's quiet. Comedian Dan Perkins, aka Tom Tomorrow, once said, "You have to want to save the world to get up every day and do this work, but also understand that you're not going to." That's the absurd balance satire teaches us, to rage and to rest, to critique and to cope. In conclusion, the joke that keeps democracy alive. Satire may not save democracy, but it keeps democracy from collapsing under its own seriousness. It's the last form of honest speech that we have. Laughter is truth-telling, irony is endurance. In de Klerk's modern world, satire is moral oxygen. It doesn't purify the air, but it keeps us breathing. Inherently, satire is a literary device that employs various techniques, such as irony, exaggeration, and ridicule, to attack and criticize a particular subject or idea. For a satire to be successful, it must have 5 key elements: attack, judgment, wordplay, humor, and the desire for reform. But something has shifted. Once satire united Americans through shared disbelief. Now it mirrors the polarization that it once mocked. Laughter that once signaled common ground now divides audiences into camps, those laughing at the joke and those feeling targeted by it. Baldwin's Trump impression, for example, became a cultural fault line. For liberals, it was validation. For conservatives, it was elitist cruelty. The joke still landed, but it no longer transcended. The great irony, then, is that the more absurd politics becomes, the less potent satire feels. When reality outpaces parody, comedy stops feeling transgressive. It starts feeling like coverage. And in that sense, satire today functions as both protest and anesthesia. It's the cultural equivalent of gallows humor, a laugh shared on the way down. It's catharsis with no consequence. Satire at its best doesn't tell us what to think. It reminds us that thinking is still possible. It reaffirms the importance of critical thinking, while also at its worst succeeding in dividing those who have villainized the opposing side. Satire may not save democracy, but without it, democracy would lose one of its last forms of honest speech: laughter as truth-telling, irony as endurance, because if we can still laugh at power, we haven't yet surrendered to it, and that's not nothing. So what do you think? Has satire lost its edge, or are we just too burnt out to laugh anymore? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me what kind of videos you want to see next. Comment MVP if you made it all the way here. And Natalie, this one was for you. And thank you all, new and old, for coming back and watching. Because in a world that's this absurd, the least that we can do is laugh together. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for watching. I woke Gilly up from a nap, so he's very grumpy. Just wanted to again say thank you to Natalie for having ads on and for subscribing, liking, commenting. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and me and this stinky man will see you in the next one.